What if Yhawch had a backup plan involving Hell, just in case he lost, that would usher in the real god of the Bleach universe? Hear me out. In Can't Fear Your Own World, Ichigo told us the truth about the Soul King. Eventually, however, the Hollows began to eat humans. At that point, the circulation stopped. Had things gone as they were, all the Kanpaku would have been reduced to one gigantic Minos, and the entire world would have come to a halt. But how curious it was, as though the world were rejecting that outcome. Suddenly, a life was born, a life that could destroy hollows, turning them into reishi sand, and once again, allowing the world to circulate. Now, contrary to popular theory and belief, I don't believe Ichigo is a liar or a villain. I do, however, believe that his words point to something that goes unnoticed in Bleach. There has to be a god more powerful than the Soul King. Can't Feel Your Own World has a double meaning. The current world is not the original one. The world they feared was the primordial world, which also adhered to a strict law of balance. The Soul King was a response to that balance collapsing. He was not God. He did not create life or death. He did not create the cycles of souls. The world was already in motion. Humanity was suffering due to hollows, and when the world was on the verge of collapse, he became the savior. And this is where I believe things get a little bit interesting, because after the Soul King rescued the world and rescued humanity, it doesn't seem like there was an issue in the primordial world. It seemed like the only issue was the Soul King's existence. Because when you look at the Shinigami noble houses, they feared the presence of the Soul King. He brought turmoil to the world for them. The Tsurushiro feared his power. The Kuchiki feared maintaining authority. The Shihon feared maintaining the cycle of souls. The Shiba wanted to negotiate. But there was one house that's currently missing that actually had a real concern involving the current state of the world, which is, if you split the world into three like the Shinigami nobility wanted to, what do you do about hell? If you think about it, Yhawch wanted to return the world to its primordial state, the world his father saved. But Adenius is not a god. Someone else created the primordial world and cared about the balance. Whoever it was already had the answer and failsafe placed through Adenius' birth. The Shinigami nobility, due to their own fear, wanted to take the Almighty to separate the realms. However, this is so important to the story. It is said that the Shiba clan's ancestor attempted to persuade him, but in that opening, the Tsurushiro's clan's ancestor sealed the Rayo into a crystal. Along with Ichigo, they took his legs, arms, and hollowed out his body, gave him the title of the Soul King, and used his godly powers to maintain an artificial system. Honestly, when you think about it, the three-world system requires more effort and has a more delicate balance to maintain than seemingly the primordial one. Why put all this effort just to put a lid on hell? That's because, looking at the story, hell existed as an open pit during that time. But it doesn't appear from the story that Ichigo told that hell was a fear for the living. We can also see this in Volume 1 when Rukia is performing Kanso. The soul Rukia sent had no knowledge of heaven, soul society, or any positive afterlife. But as a soul, he did have a fear of hell. This means that the fear held by the missing noble family was about survival. Now stick with me here. Like Kubo has expressed many times, Bleach has a Buddhist core. If you've seen my video on the cosmology of Bleach, we know that each realm of reincarnation is represented in the story. The Soul Society is seen as the Asura realm. Asura are demigods who are jealous of the Deva who live in the highest of realms. Asura hope to reincarnate in the realm of mortals. However, Asura, due to their long lives, accrue immense negative karma, and they spend eons burning it off in hell. If you look at the Buddhist lore, and you apply that to Bleach, and you think about what the Shinigami have done, it just seems like they were simply trying to avoid suffering in hell. They wanted to reincarnate as humans or stay as souls forever. When Pernita said they were always Quincy, it puts their slaughter into perspective. Why would the world give birth to something that could seemingly destroy it? However, in the primordial world, where the only thing that required balance was the managing of hollows, Quincy should reign supreme. The Shinigami presence is not needed. However, the roles are reversed in the three-world system that the Shinigami used the Soul King to create. The Shinigami, through their Research Development Institute, invest a great deal of time and resources in artificial soul technology. Urahara, Mayuri, it's almost as if they're looking for the Shinigami equivalency of the Quincy who was naturally born to support the world that they created. So when you think about all of the effort the Shinigami go through to maintain their world and their balance, and you think about just how connected Yhawch was not only to his Quincy roots, but understanding the world that his father saved, it's really hard for me to believe that Yhawch had no knowledge over hell. Collapsing the worlds back into one means removing the seal from hell, So either Yhawch had no fear of hell, or the relationship between hell and the Quincy's is not as the same as the relationship between the Shinigami, who honestly seem to be out of place in the larger scheme. Yhawch, when he fought Ichigo, said, unlike Ichigo and Orihime, who has changed fate multiple times, either through rejection like with Orihime's power, or through what I suspect Ichigo's true ability to be, which is fate change, that he can see multiple futures like grains of sand. If there was at any point in time Yhawch saw a future where he still lost after breaking Tetsu Sengetsu, then it makes so much more sense what he said to Ichigo as he was leaving through the portal. I will survey your futures from this point on and choose the moment at which you feel the greatest happiness. That is the moment when I will take your lives. For the rest of your lives, whenever you feel happiness, you will remember my words, and each time you will tremble in fear of your promised death forever. It almost seems like what he said to Ichigo before the final phase of the fight is in contradiction to what he said to Ichigo at the end of the final phase of their fight. But in reality, I think what Yhawch was saying was painting himself as a savior. Because listen to his words. How disappointing. Because of you, life and death will not lose their form. All living things will continue to live their lives in fear of death forever. But isn't that what Yhawch wanted for Ichigo? Unless Yhawch knew only through his life and remaining alive that they can keep away the greater enemy that is still to come. It's been 12 years since Ichigo and Yhawach's fight, and the words Yhawch spoke to Ichigo before he stepped off into the portal. In the one-shot Bleach Echoing Jaws of Hell, Saizo Pearl is back as a villain. He explains how he was cast into hell, how his hatred flows like tears, and how he cast away the whole from being a hollow from his flesh. But the most important line he said to Ichigo was, "It won't earn me much acclaim to kill you now, but I'm going to kill you, Ichigo Kurosaki." Then Jushiro Ukitake, who has finally made it to hell, pulls him back. It wasn't Ichigo's greatest moment of happiness just yet, and maybe that's why Ukitake pulled Saizo Pearl back. Whatever is coming out of those hell portals is a greater evil than Aizen or Yhawch. Ichigo is the savior of the three-world system the Shinigami created. When you think about it, it seems like whatever greater god exists in the Bleach universe tried once through Adenius, the Soul King, to correct the balance, but they mutilated his body and created a new world because they feared his power. So it seems like another was sent, calling himself the son of the Soul King, Yhawch, who had the ability to share his power. He also ended up mutilated and replaced his father on the throne. If Yhawch manifested a portion of his power through Ichigo, then maybe he was right, and despite his loss, he knew he would get the last laugh, because this time, the father of all would return, the supreme god of Bleach, manifesting through Ichigo's son, Kazui Kurosaki. This is a quick theory I wanted to put together. There's so much news out there right now with the final core around the corner, a potential Hell Arc, that I wanted to just kind of go through the story and look at all the breadcrumbs that I've been accumulating. And for me personally, it looks like Kubo is telling a bigger story on top of his main story of Bleach. And that's a sign of a great writer, in my opinion. You give me a really great main story to hold on to that gives solid answers that I don't have to make up headcanon for, but at the same time, as someone who likes to speculate, create theories, and just kind of see what the bigger story is, he opens up so many doors to that. And that's why I love Bleach. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to subscribe, turn alerts to stay caught up as we go through the final core. That's all for me. I'm Zaku Zealot. Peace out.